So we want to introduce the unit company law. And the first important thing will be to understand what are the different topics that you need to know concerning company law. Please, we shall be utilizing the past papers from today. From today, we shall be using the past papers. You will not survive. If you are those people who like printing, please print those past papers up to the last sitting, because we shall be using them in every class. So when you talk of company law, a unit taken intermediate by CPA and CS students, we always say that it refers to, or it is a branch of law that tells us what are some of the legal principles that need to be followed by entities that have been formed to carry out different objectives. What am I saying? We are saying that we need to understand what are some of the principles, and in this case, the legal principles that will be guiding us as we form these entities or these vehicles that we may be using or we use to conduct activities and also to achieve objectives. That is what we will be discussing in this unit. So we will be asking ourselves, is it true that if today I listened to one of the stories that people talk, and somebody will be saying, and you ask yourself, what is the main reason why if Richard wants to vie for an MCA seat today or MP seat, the first important thing he will be telling you is that, and he'll be telling his friends, please, when I get this seat, you must ensure you have a company. That is the saying that everyone will be telling you. Please ensure you must have a company. And therefore, somebody may ask themselves, why? And they'll be telling them, oh, I will help you to get tenors. That is the Kenyan culture. I will help you to get tenors. So when we'll be discussing this unit, by the end of this unit, by the end of this semester, you must be appreciating those statements. You must be. So that as we near the elections, you must understand your friends. When they tell you, you must have a company. Why? Because once a company is formed, it will exist as a distinct and separate entity from the owners and members. Once a company is formed, it will exist as a distinct and separate entity from the owners and members. And that is why if Richard is a friend to Evelyn here, and Richard gets this MCA seat or the MP seat, he will just be given a certain company. You will just be seeing, if you try to audit, if the governance, the auditor comes to the CDFs or to the MP consistencies, they will just be appreciating, oh, I can see there is a certain company that has been getting a lot of tenors. This company is known as Skyscrapers. Those funny names. If you try to listen to this governance or the auditors report, you will find that you are being told very funny names. Now, it is in this unit where we will be appreciating why do people form companies, so that you may never know. So you will just be seeing that which is these best projects that these MPs are doing. They are putting cabros in these schools. But when you go and check, which is this company that is providing these services? The Skyscrapers Company Limited. Will you know who is the owner? No. So you will just be seeing this tender has been won by Skyscrapers Company Limited. It is in this unit where we will be appreciating and saying that in some circumstances, we need to do something we call lifting the veil of incorporation. Lifting the veil. Because once we form a company, there is a veil. That there's a distinction between Richard or Evelyn and Skyscrapers Company. That is what we mean. And that is why we form companies. If you're asking yourself, why are you being told to form a company? It is because we shall be saying that a company is very different from the owner. But in some circumstances, we shall be appreciating. So let us check. What are some of the topics that we need to understand so that that whole concept can be understood by everyone and everyone must enjoy. So the first topic will be nature and classification of companies. Nature and classification of companies. The nature and classification of companies. We will be asking ourselves, what is the nature commonly tested? What is the characteristics of a company, which we must understand so that all the other topics can be appreciated. So after understanding what is a company, what are the characteristics of a company, what are the different classes of companies, we shall go to the second topic, formation of a company. Now, formation of a company. How do we form a company? That is what we'll be asking ourselves. How do we form a company? Please, we will be saying that there are different methods. More so in the current era, we are having very, very easy ways of forming a company. Reason being that this thing can easily be accessed through the eCitizen portal. You just have direct details. So we will be answering that in this, the formation of a company. What are the documents that are required for you to form a company, etc. Okay. Then the third one, we will be saying that topic, membership of a company. A membership of a company. How do I become a member? Who is a member? How do I become a member and who is a member? That is what we will be answering. Who is a member and how do we become how do I become a member in a company? Okay, membership of a company. Okay, then after that, we shall be going through, after membership, we will go to the fourth topic. The fourth topic is known as the shares. So what is the shares? Ownership within a company. When you say that I'm a shareholder, it means I own some shares. I have some ownership rights in a company. I have some ownership rights in a company. Then after that, we will be discussing share capital. What is the meaning of share capital? What is the amount of capital that has been invested in a company? What is the amount of capital? Because we have said shares, it is ownership. So we are asking ourselves, what is the amount of capital that has been invested in a company by the shareholders? What is the amount of capital? After that, after share capital, we will be discussing debt capital. Debt capital. So what is the meaning of debt capital? We do not have enough money. So what is the next thing that is happening? We shall now be asking ourselves, how do we get loans? Okay, so debt capital from the word loans. We will be asking ourselves, what is the procedure? What are the effects of borrowing more loans? And we don't, what is the effects of borrowing loans and we refuse to repay the loans? Okay, a very common question. What is the rights of the lender in case of borrowing and you fail to repay the loans? Topic number 7, we will be discussing now what we call company meetings. What is a company meeting? Okay. What are some of the essential elements of a company meeting? And then what are some of the exceptions? We shall be introducing case laws here. There's a case law here, okay, where we will be saying that it is a requirement for you to know what is the meaning of a company meeting, because a company meeting refers to a meeting that is held by at least 2 persons, okay, at least 2 persons, and they conduct lawful transactions of a company, okay? So company meeting. So what are the circumstances where one person constitutes a company meeting here? We will then discuss something we call the company directors. Who is a director? What are the qualifications, disqualifications, okay, duties, etc. Topic 9, we shall be asking ourselves, a company secretary? Some of us are taking CS, so we will be asking ourselves those questions here. What is the meaning of a company secretary? And what are some of the qualifications, duties, etc. Topic 10. For the topic 10, we will then go to what we call investigation into the company affairs. Investigation into the company affairs. Okay, investigation into the company affairs. We will want to know this, and this topic, it comes from the first topic that we have seen as a company that Richard has become an MP here, and he has his friend who has formed these skyscrapers. Okay. Now, after some few months, or after some few period, or after a certain period, what happens? Some people may raise alarm that, okay, why is this company getting these tenders, etc. And they can go to court. And even if they fail to go to court, it is stated in the Companies Act that a company may, or the registrar of companies may investigate the affairs of a company to determine the persons who own that company, the persons who control the affairs of that company. So we will be asking ourselves, what are some of the expected results in case of investigation into the company affairs? What are some of the powers of an inspector appointed to investigate into the company affairs? So that is what we'll be saying. Investigation into company affairs. After understanding the investigation into company affairs, we will also now discuss what we call the company auditors. Okay, the company auditors. Still on matters concerning investigation or examining the statements of a company. And then after company auditors, we will then go to what we call the company accounts and reports. Company accounts and reports. Company accounts and reports. What are the different? You'll find in your papers the examiner saying outline 5 impacts of non-compliance with the company's accounts. Another paper will ask you identify some of the financial statements of a company. So we shall be answering them here. The company accounts and reports. After understanding the company accounts and reports, we shall now go to what we call the corporate restructuring. So we have been investigating, the auditors came, we have gone through the company's accounts, and we have seen that this company is failing. This company is facing some serious financial concern. So what we need to do, we need to restructure it. Company restructuring. We shall be restructuring the company. Okay. After the company restructuring, so we are reorganizing. We will be asking ourselves, what are the different methods of reorganizing a company? We have noted our company is suffering. So what should we do so that we stop the suffering? We can either merge with another company that is enjoying. We can also decide, okay, then let us now reconstruct. Let us get another company, what we call the takeover. If that fails, then the other topic will be receivership and liquidation of companies. Receivership and liquidation of companies. Receivership and liquidation of companies. Sawa, the receivership or the liquidation. So we are now bringing the company, the life of a company is coming to an end. And then the last topic will be the foreign companies. What is a foreign company? We always say that a foreign company refers to a company that has been incorporated outside Kenya, but has a branch in Kenya. That is the word. That is the meaning of foreign company. We have a company that has been incorporated outside Kenya and has a branch in Kenya. Please, when I use the word incorporation, I hope somebody can remember introduction to law and governance, the law of persons, the concept known as incorporation. And if you have forgotten, we shall be reminding you here. What is the meaning of incorporation? Because you have to remember. So those are the topics that we'll be going through, the 15 topics in our course outline. Topic 1, nature and classifications of companies. Nature and classification of companies. That is what I want us to start. What is a company? We want to understand what is a company. What is a company? I want us to define the word company in two main definitions. Define the term company. You know, define the term company. We are assured that even in the April 2025 examination, there must be some concept that will be revolving this definition. So define the term company. Let us say that there are two main school of thoughts. There are two main school of thoughts. There are two main school of thoughts that explain the concept, that explain the concept of a company. The concept of a company. The first school of thought is known as the commercial school of thought. The first one is the commercial school of thought. The commercial school of thought. So what does the commercial school of thought tell us? It tells us that a company is an association or a group of persons who come together to carry out business with a view of making profit. It is an association or a group of persons that come together to carry out an activity or business with a view of making profit. With a view of making profit. That is the commercial school of thought, that a company refers to. A company refers to an association or a group of persons. That one we will not deal with it because that one is not talking about the law. We want to focus with the legal definition. Has it the time reached? Abubakar, just 1 minute. And then let us just give the second definition and then we go. Then we come after that 15 minutes. Exactly 7. So then let us give the legal school of thought. Then we can give our brothers and sisters to go and pray. The legal school of thought. What does the legal school of thought tell us? It tells us that a company is a legal entity. A company is a legal entity or body corporate that is registered to exist as a distinct and separate entity from the owners and members. From the owners and members. That is the definition. So let us give a pens here. Please be checking that one because the whole of today's class, we will be discussing this second definition. The first one, that one is for the people there. Let us have that break so that at exactly 7, let us give those of us who are going to pray a chance to go and pray, and then we can come back at 7 p.m. we are now defining, this definition must be understood. Please, this is the basis of company law, that we want to understand the definition of a company. We have the second definition known as the legal school of thought. For the legal school of thought, a company is a legal entity or body corporate that is registered to exist as a distinct and separate entity from the owners and members. That is what we mean by the company from the legal school of thought. That definition must be understood from today onwards, because it will form the basis that when we talk of that Richard has formed a company, so and so has formed a company, our main definition will not be the commercial school of thought. For most of us, they use the commercial one. But now, as a legal scholar, we always say the reason why I am telling you I am vying for this and I want you to have this company, it is because once you form a company, it is a legal entity or body corporate that will be registered by who? Registrar of Companies, so that it can exist as a distinct and separate entity. So that day, sometimes you'll hear somebody saying, I do not have money, but my company has money. Somebody will be convincing themselves by saying, the loan was taken by PAP College Company, and therefore the owners of PAP College cannot be asked to pay the money, because if you entered into a contract between PAP College and Nancy here, if it is a contract between PAP College and Nancy, Nancy cannot come and meet Richard here and say, okay, you know, I gave you the money, and now I paid the money to this company, but now because you have refused to do this, can you pay me? No, that can never happen. That is why people will tell you, once we have served you, you can only take the company. Have you seen the issue that is in the X platform, where people are saying, okay, there's a person who has been selling cars. He did not deliver the cars. And because he did not deliver the car, then somebody has taken him to the police station. And then people were saying, yes, he should be locked there. That is not how we operate, because once we register a company must exist as a distinct and separate entity from the owners and the members. Therefore, the operations of that company must be different and must be distinguished by everyone. Okay? We do not want to name names. We do not want to say names here, so that we cannot be taken somewhere. So we are saying the company must be, please, I am repeating so that by the end of this class, you must be singing with me that yes, the only thing that I have understood from our first company law class is that once I form a company, it is known as a legal entity and it will exist as a separate entity from me. And therefore, everything that will be done by that company will be the company and me. In one of the past papers, the examiner asked, I think in the exam, there is a question that was tested in the August 2024 question 1A. August 2024 question 1A, the examiner asked, define the term body corporate. Define the term body corporate. Define the term body corporate. 2 marks. You see, that is why we are insisting by people knowing the definition. Yes, because once you know this, you will not miss the 2 marks. Actually, it was the first one. So how could you have answered? You'll just tell us, what is a body corporate? It refers to a legal entity that has been registered, to exist as a distinct and separate entity from owners and members. From owners and members. From the owners and members. That is what the examiner, and you get your 2 marks. Because the most important, what you are being tested is, do you understand that once you register this entity, It will exist as a distinct and separate entity from the owners and members. Do you understand that? And therefore, where did we get this concept? Maybe somebody is struggling to answer this question. Where did we get this concept of once you register something, it will exist as a distinct and separate entity? I want to remind you, if you have taken the introduction to law and governance, there's a topic known as law of persons. Okay, law of persons. And we were saying that there are two categories of persons. The first person is the natural person. You and I, you are the natural person, the human being. Then the second person, we were saying, is known as the artificial person. And we asked ourselves, how can we get an artificial person? And the answer was through incorporation. Okay? Through incorporation. Therefore, what is the meaning of incorporation? The answer was that it refers to the process of registering. The process of registering an entity so that this entity will exist as a distinct and separate from the owner. So that this registration will give us rise or will help us to have this person we know as an artificial person. Tunaelewana? So that is why anytime we are discussing what is a company, please remember, a company is a body corporate. Okay? And this question has been tested. Let us also look for another definition that has been tested. We go to the examination, the Company Law, December 2023, question 1A. Company Law, December 2023, question 1A. Company Law, December 2023, question 1A. The examiner now, in this case, they asked us, define or explain the concept of legal personality, 4 marks. Explain the concept, December 2023, December 2023, question 1A. Explain the concept of legal personality. Explain the concept of legal personality, 4 marks. Tumekuja pole pole. We are now getting 2 persons, artificial person and a natural person. The artificial person is coming about or is emerging because of this concept we call registration. This registration, we have said it is known as incorporation. So what is the meaning of legal personality? It was a 4 marks question, question 1B. And the worst thing with these things, they will be tested. If you are asking yourself, where will it be tested? Question 1. So when you you see the way that examiner will tell you that don't lift that paper. So the first thing, when you lift that paper and turn it, the first question will be the question on classifications and nature of a company. That's a must. That must be the first question in each and every company law examination. So what is the meaning of the concept legal personality? You can say the principle of legal personality provides that the principle of legal personality provides that once a company we can talk of a company or a body corporate, once a company or a body corporate. Actually, let us use the word company. Once a company is formed, let us use the word a company. Once a company is formed and is registered, it becomes a separate entity from the owners and members, from the owners and members. and members becomes a separate entity. Actually, we use the word, it becomes separate and distinct entity from the owners and members. Okay? It acquires the characteristics, of an incorporated association. It acquires the characteristics of an incorporated association. Okay? So where did we get this concept of the legal personality? This concept was derived in the case of Salmon versus Salmon. In the case of Salmon versus Salmon Company Limited. Salmon versus, some books will call it Salomon, others Salmon. No one will tell you to tell us the citations. No one has ever. Please do not try to shine. You cannot be shining an exam. An exam we want to pass. So don't be shining. That I even know I can quote. What are you quoting? Don't quote anything. Just tell us that I understand the concept of the legal personality. So the marking point was up to here. Please, this one, I want to explain this concept. The marking point was up to here so that you get your 4 marks here. Legal personality, that once a company is formed and it's registered, it becomes a distinct and separate entity. A distinct and separate entity from the owners and the members, or even from the owners and the managers, and therefore this entity will acquire the characteristics of incorporated association. I hope somebody is not suffering by the word incorporated, because you have said it refers to registration. We are registering a company. So what happens? What happens when you have formed a company, but you have not registered it with the registrar of companies? It means that that company will not have the characteristics of a valid company. What am I saying? It will not be incorporated association. It will be an unincorporated association. Unincorporated meaning that it does not acquire the characteristics of a company as stated in the law. So while yes, you have come together, you have used the commercial definition, you have come together, you are conducting business, and that business is earning money, and you have not registered it with the registrar of companies, then it means that that is not a company before the law. That one is an incorporated association. We actually say that one is not a company. It is more of a partnership. Okay? It is more of a partnership. It is not being governed by the Companies Act, because once it is a company and it is registered, it is governed by the Companies Act 2015. So let us understand. And that is why I'm saying, please ensure by the end of today, if you're near a person, you'll tell them, there's one thing that I have known, that once we have formed a company, it is a body corporate, and it will exist as a distinct and separate entity from the owners and the members. Okay? Okay then. We are saying that this concept was derived in the case of Salomon versus Salomon Company Limited. Let us understand what were some of the few, we just want to summarize, what were some of the brief facts of this case, so that it can make sense. It gives us all these concepts that we use up to now. And this was an 1800 case, the Salomon versus Salomon. So what happened is Salomon started what we call a sole proprietorship business. A sole proprietorship business, that the one that we have in our village, the kiosk. And that kiosk, he was selling leather industry or the leather products. Okay, Salomon. He started a small shop selling the leather products. It was more of a sole proprietorship. But then what happened? The business grew. The business grew. And once it grew as a norm, it is a norm that somebody will tell you, once it has grown, can you make it a company? And that is what he did. He registered this business to be a private company limited. Okay? To be a private, not private limited company. So it became a private limited company. So from Salomon, the one that we commonly say to be Salmon Company Limited. So that is what happened. It grew, he decided to register. The word is register, to incorporate this sole proprietorship to be a private company. Okay? And once he formed this private company, he decided that he wants to hire the wife and the kids to be the managers and the employees of this company. That is what happens normally. Once we grow, we need to help others, our family people. So that is what he did. I think that is where people started this thing that if you want to fail in business, can you just employ your people? Because what happened eventually is that the wife and the kids, they mismanaged their company. And therefore, the company started taking loans from different people. And Salmon was one of the creditors or one of the persons that were giving those loans to this Salmon Company Limited. Are you together? So Salmon here, he's also being asked, can you, we are suffering. Can you give us some 10,000? He's giving them. So and when the company, as we have seen in our syllabus, when the company faced financial challenges, the next thing was liquidation. What is liquidation? That the company needs to be wound up. So when we'll be discussing when the company needs to be wound up, we shall be saying that one of the persons that needs to be prioritized are the creditors. Now we will be categorizing the secured creditors, etc. So when the Salomon Company Limited was to be liquidated, the company was to pay the creditors. Company was to pay the creditors. So what happened? The management of Salmon Company Limited were of the view, okay, yes, we will pay the creditors, but for Salmon, we will not pay him. Why? Because he's the owner of this company. So when he was injecting this capital, it was more of, it is his own business. It is his own property. And therefore, he should not be compensated. But the judges who were listening to that case, they said, once a company is formed, it will exist as a distinct and separate entity from the owners and members. And therefore, Salmon, as one or the main owner of this company, he needs to be compensated by Salmon Company Limited. You have to remember those things because that is the basis of a company. That once we form this company, it will exist as a distinct and separate entity from the owners and members. So anytime you are sitting in an exam and you see, for example, question. Explain 3 characteristics of a company. May 2021 examination, the examiner asked in May 2021. So let us answer those questions. May 2021. Question 2A. May 2021, question 2A. The examiner was saying, can you tell us, explain 3 characteristics of a company, 6 marks. Explain 3 characteristics of a company, 6 marks. Okay. The examiner in another paper in December 2024, question 1A. December 2024, Question 1A, the examiner asks, can you outline the characteristics through which a company, outline the characteristics through which, actually the word was the legal characteristics through which companies operate in Kenya, through which companies operate, let us say in your country, operate in your country, through which companies operate in your country. The examiner went ahead in August 2023. In August 2023, question 6B, not C, where the examiner said, highlight the advantages, highlight 3 advantages of the doctrine of legal personality, the advantages of the doctrine of legal personality, and the disadvantages, of the legal personality. How many marks? It was a 12 marks question. It was a 12 marks question. The examiner has also asked, in the December 2022, question 1B, December 2022, question 1B, that you tell us the effects of the legal principle. December 2022, question 1B, you highlight the effect. Highlight the effect of the legal principle, elucidated in the case of Salomon versus Salmon. Salmon versus Salmon. And lastly, the examiner has also asked in May 2016, question 6A, May 2016, question 6A, you identify the consequences of incorporation. You identify the consequences of incorporation. Identify the consequences of incorporation. Identify the consequences. So the examiner can use the word consequences, effects, or advantages. Effects or advantages of incorporation. The advantages of incorporation. How many marks? 10 marks. All those questions that I've listed there, they're asking us the same things. All those questions that I have asked you here, or I have stated there, they are asking us the same questions. So let us answer the answers now. So if you ask the characteristics of a company, the advantages of a company, if you check your papers, you will find the examiner telling you that Richard owns, I think it was also in the December 2022 or 2023 or 2024, not 2024, 2023, where the examiner was saying that XYZ owns a sole proprietorship business. He's your friend and he has decided that he wants to form a private company, or he wants to convert his company from a sole proprietorship to a private company limited. And then you ask, outline 5 characteristics or outline 6 characteristics of the entity that will be formed once he convert it to a private company limited. Those things are the same. So, and you're being told that this one has this, he wants to form a private company. Can you advise him on some of the characteristics of this entity that he needs to form? Please remember, you're being asked, what are the characteristics of a company? Okay. And anytime you see the case of Salmon versus Salmon, please, before you try to convince yourself with those bad spirit of doubting yourself, can you first list the characteristics of a company? Because I can assure you, anytime you see the concept of Salmon versus Salmon, anytime you see the characteristics of a company, incorporation, legal personality, the answers that we want to answer are here. 1, separate legal entity. Separate legal entity. So the first characteristics of a company is that it is a separate legal entity. What does that mean? Once a company is formed, it becomes a legal person. It becomes a legal person. Once a company is formed, it becomes a legal person, and it is separate from its members. And it is separate and distinct from the members. And distinct from members. Who is a member? Any person who appears in the register of members of a company is known as a member. And mostly in the Companies Act 2015, we are saying that a member is mostly a shareholder. A member, we shall be discussing that in topic 3. The second thing we shall be saying is perpetual succession. Perpetual succession. Perpetual succession. So what is the meaning of perpetual succession? That once a company is formed, it continues to exist indefinitely and can only come to an end, through a legal process, known as winding up. So we will be understanding, when can we say that we want to wind up a company? Perpetual succession. Okay. The third one, you can say, the third characteristics is that capacity to own property. Capacity to own property. Okay, capacity to own property, that a registered company can own property under its own name. A registered company can own property under its own name. Under its own name. So you can find that it is true you can find that our company here has its own, or PAP College as a company has its own building as a company. Okay. The other one, capacity to contract. Capacity to contract under its own name. Under its own name. Under its own name. So once a company is registered, I'm repeating the word registered. Once a company is registered, so that somebody is asking themselves, what are the advantages of the doctrine of legal personality? What are the advantages? We are now giving them. That once a company is registered, because the legal personality will only be acquired after we have registered. After you have registered, once a company is registered, it can enter, or it acquires the contractual capacity to enter into contracts. It acquires the contractual capacity to enter into contracts. Okay. The fifth one, we can also say the capacity to sue or be sued under its own name. The capacity to sue or be sued under its own name. Capacity to sue or be sued. Capacity to sue and be sued under its own name. Under its own name. So once a company is registered, once you see the definition are the same. So the moment you remember these points, it will be easier. Once a company is registered, I want to tell you that we just need some paraphrasing. Don't give us many stories. Once a company is registered, it can sue or be sued. Can sue or be sued as a proper plaintiff or defendant in a case. Or defendant in a case. If you want, if you're that person who confuses, oh, is it a plaintiff or not? Just say once a company is registered, it can sue or be sued in a case, and you get all your marks. Then another one, you can also say limited liability. Limited liability. Limited liability. What does it mean? That the member's liability towards the company's debt. The member's liability towards the company's debt is limited to, it's limited. I will explain this one. Is limited. Actually, say is limited by shares or guarantee. Shares or guarantee. I will explain this one. Then the last one, so that we can also talk of independent management. Independent management. Independent management. What does it tell us? Once a company is registered, it is managed. It is managed by board of directors. Board of directors and not shareholders. And not shareholders. We have answered all those questions that we are being asked there. What we have written up to now, we have answered everything. We have answered everything that you need to know here. That once we register a company, I think these ones we have discussed. The only things that I can talk about is here, the limited liability and independent management. Okay. For the perpetual succession, I hope you can see perpetual succession. It means that we registered a company, yes, it will continue to be there until when it can only be wound up, or it can only be ended through the legal means. Okay, through the legal means. And what are the different ways of ending a company? We shall be discussing in the topic receivership and liquidation of a company. Here we are talking of limited liability. We do not want you to suffer. What is the meaning of liability? It means to be held accountable. To be held accountable. So we are saying that the members, who are the members? The owners. Kwa sababu nimesema, the Companies Act 2015 is saying any person who is a member or who appears in the register of members, they are mostly the shareholders. Okay. Today, if you want to become a member of a certain company, you need to buy some shares. That is what we are saying. That limited liability, to be held accountable. So the members' liability or the members' accountability, they will be held accountable towards the company's debt. Towards the company. So if the company is owing someone, the one that we have been saying, then the company is owing somebody 300,000, the liability or the owner will only be held accountable up to a certain extent. If we forget these ones, please, if you forget this one is limited by shares or guarantee, just tell us that the member's liability towards the company's debt is limited, or yes, is limited up to a certain extent. Nobody will deny your mark. It's limited up to a certain extent, or it is limited by shares. We will be discussing company limited by shares or company limited by guarantee. So it can either be limited by shares or the guarantee. Shall be answering in some few minutes. Okay, but shares means if you had allocated you 500,000 shares and you have only paid 300,000, even if the company owes somebody 2 million and you have not paid the 200,000, you will be held accountable for the 200,000 shares or the unpaid shares that you hold. I repeat, our company, PIP College, owes Equity Bank 10 million. Richard, being one of the member, he has been allocated 500,000 shares, but he has only paid 300,000. So we shall be saying, if it's a company limited by shares, Richard can only be asked to pay the 200,000, because once I form the company, I do not care. Once I register the company, I do not care about the 10 million. The only thing they can ask me as a company is the 200,000 that I have not paid. Shares. Guarantee, it's like a pledge. We are pledging. So once we are forming a company, we can pledge. We are 3 of us or 2 of us, or I alone. In our articles of association, we can pledge that if this company is to be wound up, if this company is to come to an end, then I pledge that I will pay 500,000 on the loan that will be there if that company will be having any loans. I pledge. So what do we say? We will be saying that a company limited by guarantee, the member's liability is limited to the amount they undertook to contribute to the assets of the company in the event of liquidation. We shall be saying that. So if I said 500,000 and the company owes 800,000, they can only tell me, please, Richard, can you pay the amount that you undertook to contribute to the assets of the company in the event of liquidation? This one. So it is true that once we form a company, we will have some limited liability. That is very different from when it is a sole proprietor, because when it is a sole proprietor and you have failed to pay these Shylocks and everyone, then they come and pick everything. This one, there's limited liability. Independent management. Why are we saying that that is a characteristics or an advantage? Because once you form a company, it will be governed by the board of directors and not the shareholders. What is the distinction? Can you remember Mutuse 1, Mutuse 2? When somebody was being asked, how many shares? Who owned this VP? Was it VP or VP something there? And somebody was saying that this 1,000, 10,000 shares, we can see the shares. The shares are held by the late. The shares, the CR12 is saying the shares are held by the late. So who are the directors? The directors are one of the sons of this. So then the answer is, it is true that once you form a company, there is independent management. So you cannot be saying that the shareholder and the director are one and the same thing. But we will be discussing also the concept of lifting the veil of incorporation. So we have answered those questions. The only thing that we have not answered is this one: the disadvantages of legal personality. The advantages, this one. The characteristics, this one. The legal characteristics, these ones. The effects of Solomon versus Solomon, because the effect is the effect of legal principle, legal personality. So if you ask, what are some of the effects of the doctrine of legal personality? The effect, these ones. The consequences, the advantages of incorporation, this one. So let us answer, what are some of the disadvantages of the doctrine of legal personality? The disadvantages of the doctrine of legal personality, they are similarly to what are some of the disadvantages of a company? I repeat, that the disadvantages of the doctrine of legal personality, it is similar to the disadvantages of a company. So let us answer that. The disadvantages of a company. We can say one. Let us just use them. This one, I think they are just direct. We can easily answer them. So outline the disadvantages of a company. The disadvantages of a company. Outline the disadvantages of a company. So when you talk of the disadvantages of a company, we want to say that one, it is costly. Why? It involves many expenses. It involves many expenses. It is expensive. So the explanation will be, it is expensive to form and maintain a company. It is expensive to form and maintain a company. The second one, we can also pay payment of corporation tax or payment of corporate tax. Payment of corporate tax. Payment of corporate tax. Where we can say that the tax paid by the company, the taxes paid by the company or the corporation tax is higher than other entities. The corporation tax is higher than other entities. The corporation tax paid is higher than other entities. Corporation tax paid is higher than other entities. So that is the corporation tax. You can also tell us non-participation in management. Non-participation in the management. Non-participation in the management. Non-participation in the management. Non-participation in the management, where we can say the shareholders are not involved in the day-to-day running of the organization. The shareholders are not involved in the day-to-day running of the organization. The shareholders are not involved in the day-to-day running of the organization. So that is a disadvantage. You know why? When we'll be discussing, also those of us maybe who are taking CS, we always have something we call the agency theory. And for the agency theory, it tells us, that there is a distinction between the shareholders' goals and the management goals. So you'll find that sometimes the management will be making decisions to their favor. For example, they want to increase some salaries. That is not the objective of a shareholder. Okay, so that is why we say that non-participation in the management is one of the disadvantages, because some of the policies that are being formulated there by the board of directors, it is more to benefit them. Okay, it is more of to benefit them. Then the other one we can say, formalities. It has very many formalities. Now, the formation and registration of a company, formation and registration of a company, formation and registration of a company involves formation and registration of a company involves formation and registration of a company involves a lot of legal procedures, which require or which consume a lot of time, which consume a lot of time, which consume a lot of time. So, which consume a lot of time. Lastly, you can talk of publicity. Publicity. That once a company is formed and registered, the constitutive documents, once a company is formed and registered, the constitutive documents are public documents. They are made public documents. They are made public documents. Therefore reducing confidentiality. Therefore, reducing confidentiality. Or this violation of confidentiality. Therefore, reducing or violating confidentiality. So that is, you can add as many points as possible, but now we have answered. If somebody tells you, so what are some of the challenges that somebody will be facing once they will be forming a private company? Tell them this. What are some of the disadvantages of harm? Tell them this. So those are some of the first part of the syllabus, the nature of companies, very must. It's a very common area. And I've told you the different. You will see like an examiner in November 2018. The examiner telling you, outline four characteristics that may flow. Outline four characteristics that may flow from incorporation of unincorporated association. Outline four characteristics that may flow from incorporation of unincorporated associations. Is that a tough question? 8 marks question? No, it is not, because the examiner is still asking you, tell us this. The characteristics that will flow from incorporating unincorporated association. In other words, what are some of the characteristics that will flow from incorporating a sole proprietorship to be a private company? Because for the sole proprietorship, it is unincorporated association. For the private company, it is incorporated association. I hope no one is surviving. You will answer that. So the next one is on the classifications of companies. So the second bit now is on classification of companies. The classification of companies. The second bit. I just want to list here a question, and that is why we will start in our next class, classification of companies. So we have answered everything on the nature of a company. Go through past papers, check. Is there a question that I did not give on classification of companies? Then you can tell us. So for the classification of companies, we want to start with the first one, where the examiner can tell you, describe 5 classifications of companies under the Companies Act. Question, describe 5 classifications of companies companies under the Companies Act. Ten marks. That question can also be known as examine five sorry, examine five types or five classification of registered companies. Examine five types of registered companies. Examine five types. So the other way this question will be, it will be examine five types of registered companies. And I want to start by saying, just right here and say that registered companies are their companies that are formed and registered in accordance with the provisions of the Companies Act. Of the Companies Act. With the Companies Act. That is what we mean by registered companies. The companies that are registered in accordance with the provisions of the Companies Act. Okay, so what are some of the companies? Maybe we can just list them first and then we will explain them. So we have what we call the private companies. Actually, you can talk of the private limited company, public limited company, public limited company, company limited by shares, company limited by shares, company limited by guarantee, and the last one is unlimited companies. Unlimited companies. So when we will be answering this question, we will be solving different questions. For example, if you check the past papers, in the April 2024, the examiner asked in question 2, distinguish between public limited company and private limited company, 4 marks. And this is a common question, distinction between public and private company. So when you'll be solving, the first thing we will try to answer this question by distinguishing their characteristics. You can also find, can you tell us 5 characteristics of a public company? Okay, so we will be answering that. And then for this other 3, when we'll be answering this one, we shall be saying that the examiner can also twist this question and tell you, like in the December 2023, the examiner saying, examine or describe 3 classifications of companies based on their liability. Describe 3 classifications of a company based on their liability. So when you ask that question, because it's a 6 marks question, how will you answer? We will not be answering using these 3. We shall repeat those 2 questions. So when we'll be answering this question on the classifications of companies, we will be answering very many questions that are common. 1, distinguish between these 2. Then, what are the advantages of either a public company of a private company or a private company of a public company? Then, we will also be asking ourselves, if we know those characteristics, advantages, disadvantages, etc., then the other thing will be, what about the second tier in these registered companies? Company limited by shares, company limited by guarantee, and unlimited companies. We will start by asking ourselves a question that examine 3 classifications of a company based on their liability. Examine 3 classifications of a company based on their liability. So how will you answer that? These ones, by telling us the meaning of this. And after telling us the meaning of this, the examiner in one of the papers can easily ask you, can you outline 4 characteristics of a company limited by guarantee? Distinguish between company limited by guarantee and company limited by shares. So please try to answer, start asking yourself these questions that I've said, so that when you'll be answering them, because it is there and it is obvious. Topic 1 must be tested in each and every examination. So we are also waiting for it. So we need to ensure that we understand those classifications. That is where we will start in our next class.